All right, Melinda, come on up. This is Melinda Bachini, and Melinda has worked with us for quite a long time. Melinda is a 6.5-year survivor. You're going to find in this room there are many long-term survivors, and I hope that gives you a lot of hope, and you'll spend some time. Gary's an 8-year survivor, right? And we have some others that are going to speak with you later in the program. So, Melinda.
Thanks, Stacey. Hi, everybody. I just want to give a shout out to all the patients and families and caregivers who weren't able to make it today. We just want you to know that we know you're here in spirit, and we are thinking of you. You're in our hearts, and you're here. And I'm going to try to make it through this without crying, too, but no promises. So this is my journey of hope. Okay, nobody told me how to run this. Green. Gotcha. Okay. That's better. So this is the patient perspective. It's my perspective of the journey of the ups and downs that we all go through. I know we all share a lot of things. We all share a disease, but we all have a different path and a different journey that we've taken to get us to where we are today. This is my family. Darn it. And I wouldn't be here without them. They're definitely my rock and my foundation to get me through this. 6 kids. My oldest son turns 27 today. Happy birthday, Seth. And this is my favorite child, Harley. I have to put that in there because my kids always say, he's your favorite child. Kind of is. So my story started back in 2009. It was October, and my husband and I were taking a 2-week critical care nursing course in Sturgis, South Dakota. And that was the first time I really felt like there was something wrong, something was off. We'd been eating out, breakfast and dinners every day, and I was just getting really tight pain in my chest, my stomach area, heartburn, just something I've never experienced before. I thought I was giving myself a heart attack studying for this test because it was so hard and intense. And we were sitting at a table with a bunch of doctors, and my husband's like, I think you have gallstones. And I'm like, that makes sense. My mom had them, my sister had them. That's probably what it is. And so we went home, and the symptoms kind of went away for a while, so I kind of forgot about it. And I really didn't go to the doctor till like November for something totally different, but I mentioned it to him, and I'm so very grateful for my primary physician for saying, hey, we better get an ultrasound and check that out. Looking back before that now, I can remember sleeping a lot more, being way more fatigued. But I worked as a paramedic and worked 24-hour shifts, so I was always tired, so that made sense. I had right shoulder pain, but I carried a pack and a monitor on my shoulder all the time, and I just thought I was getting old and out of shape. And my stomach just became irritable a lot more than usual. But once again, we eat at weird times as a paramedic, and not always good food, and I just thought, everything made sense as to my job. So my primary physician sent me to get an ultrasound. I went for the ultrasound, and you know how we all read the texts, watch them, and I remember paying attention because they kept remeasuring this, she kept remeasuring this one spot and taking longer, and you always try to read their face, and they're not supposed to say anything, and I kind of thought, all right, I must have gallstones because she's, taking a little extra time. Before as I was walking through the door, coming home from that appointment, my phone was ringing, and it was my primary doc, and he said, we found a mass on your liver, and we're going to need you to come back for a CT scan. And I was like, what? I thought I had gallstones. So I went the very next day for an abdominal CT, which confirmed that there was a large size mass on my liver, the size of a grapefruit. They immediately sent me to a gastroenterologist, and she kept telling me, don't worry, it looks to be a hemangioma, don't worry, it's benign. Okay, I won't worry. Next step was a tagged red blood cell study, which proved that it was probably not a hemangioma. So then they sent me for a liver biopsy. My liver biopsy was Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and I have to tell you that was the longest 5 days of my life waiting through that holiday to get the results. But December 1st was the day. December 1st is also my son's 14th birthday, so kind of kept this a secret for a while, and I didn't want to ruin his day, but I remember very clearly my kids had just left for school. My husband had just walked out the door for a meeting. I was in my bathrobe, ready to jump in the shower, and the phone rang, and it was my gastroenterologist. And she said, I'm so sorry, this wasn't on my radar, but you have cancer. And I was like, I'm so sorry too. It definitely wasn't on my radar. And then everything went blank, or quiet. I don't remember words she said after that. I remember calling my husband home, and he came back immediately, and we laid on the bed and we cried and cried and cried and cried. And then he called her back and got all the information that I didn't remember. And then everything moved really fast. And I'm very grateful for that. I'm from Billings, Montana, and we have really good medical facilities, but we're pretty rural, but things moved really, really fast. So they weren't sure where the primary tumor was. They weren't sure for sure what kind of cancer I had. So more testing. Mammogram, not breast cancer. Head to toe CT, no other masses found. Endoscopy, clear. Colonoscopy, clear. Just all this testing. MRI showed that the tumor was confined to the liver, and it looked to be operable. And as soon as I went home and Googled it, which I highly recommend you do not do. Do not Google it. Go to the foundation website. It's much better, much more accurate information. We started making plans for surgery. The PET scan showed only uptake in the liver, so that was good. At that time, they were assuming it was cholangiocarcinoma. Cholangio, what? I've never heard of that before. Never in my life had heard of that before. So these are the statistics I was given 6.5 years ago. This is what I was told at that time. It was a rare bile duct cancer, about 1 in 100,000. And this is exactly what I wrote down on my notes. And so this is what I was told, and I know that things are changing, which I think is good too. Usually diagnosed late stages, intrahepatic, surgery's the only cure, no proven chemotherapy regimen, but the reoccurrence rate at 76%, that did not make me happy at all. I wasn't pleased with that. So we had to make the decision at that time, were we going to stay home and do surgery, or we were going to head to Mayo and have a liver specialist take out the tumor. And I was all for that, but it happened to be Christmas time, and it was stressing me out more to be away from my family than it was to drive to Mayo and have a liver specialist. So we met with a surgeon, and he won my confidence. I felt very confident that he could get it, and he, assured me that if he couldn't get it, he would have let me know. And so we stayed there in Billings, Montana, and they did a resection. It took about 6 hours, 5 units of blood, and then they removed 2/3 of my liver, and I was told that I had clean margins. So that's what they took out of my liver. The yucky white part was the tumor that they removed from my liver. That's a cross section, opened up. That's my shark bite, that my kids call it. 40-some stitches. And then in March, 3 months later, I went for my first scan, and it showed back up in my lungs. So I just remember at that time being labeled stage 4 terminal cancer patient, and somebody said that somewhere along the road, and I was like, what? I'm not okay with that. I have 6 kids, and that's just not going to cut it for me, so we're going to have to do something about that. They did a lung wedge, took out a tumor, confirmed that it was metastasized cholangiocarcinoma, and that's my first chest tube, my first of 3 that I've had. That wasn't the chest tube, that was after the chest tube was pulled. So we have to come up with a new plan now that surgery didn't cut it. I started looking for clinical trials right away, because after I did some research, I knew that what was available wasn't going to cure me. So I had a really aggressive oncologist, and we found a clinical trial, and I was all excited and hopeful, and then my insurance denied covering the standard of care. So I was just deflated, that I was hopeful, and then all of a sudden it was taken away. And I had to make a choice. You know, do I make my family go into financial distress for something that we don't know was going to work for, you know, this disease? And I just couldn't do it. So I did some lobbying with some other amazing patients, and we got the law changed in Montana. But even though it's a law, it's still hard for patients to get that coverage for clinical trials. That's our Governor Bullock, the state of Montana, signing that law into place. We drove to Mayo for a second opinion at that time to make sure, you know, what we were doing in Billings was going to be the same thing they would give us. And they had no other options but to offer me gemcitabine and cisplatin. They weren't doing any clinical trials either, anything we could do. So in June of 2010 is when I actually started my chemo. This is my daughter, Sammy, my oldest daughter. She graduated from high school the day, you know, she went to her high school graduation. I kissed her, told her I was proud of her, loved her, jumped in the car, and we drove to Mayo. And that's just how much this affects our families, as you all know. This is my first day of chemo picture. Little did I know what I was getting in for, because I soon found out chemo sucks. It's horrible. It was horrible for me. I had my weekly cocktail of cisplatin and Gemzar, with a side of steroids, antiemetics, Benadryl, followed by the 4 days of the Neupogen shots. I did this for about 6 months before the toxicity really started to set in. Tinnitus, the ringing in your ears. I remember when I first got that, I walked around the house turning things off, thinking that there was something on in the room. And I finally figured out it was in my head. There's some slight hearing loss and neuropathy in my hands and feet. And to this day, those are still my biggest complaints. It hasn't gone away for me. And then I got a bonus of steroid psychosis. I didn't know it existed, but that was me on steroids. It was crazy. I just felt like I was going crazy. There was a moment where I really seriously thought I could drive off a cliff, and it scared me. And so we figured that out and went off the steroids. But then the bad part about that is then the side effects were more harsh. So it was not really a win-win situation either way. I put this picture in because this is 6 months before I started chemo. And this is 4 months after being on chemo of Gemzar and cisplatin, and it did a job. It did a job on me. It was hard, and it was a drastic change. So my daughter and I had fun. We did some wig hunting. That was my favorite wig right there. I call it the Cher wig. It's a good biker wig. I took a chemo holiday over the holidays that day. It was 6 months, and I needed a break. It was too much. They took me off the cisplatin and did Gemzar alone. And then, unfortunately, the cancer started to grow, and it did spread back to my liver. So my husband was super nice, and he took us to Hawaii for a vacation so we could forget about it for a while, and I did. We came home with a plan to do a new treatment. I did Taxotere, which kept the cancer stable. It never shrunk it for about 6 months, and then the toxicity built up again. And I remember my last straw was when the rash was from my head to my toes, and I literally wanted to scratch the skin off my body. And that was the point where I said, okay, I'm done. I'm done. I'd rather have quality than quantity. And that was the first time, you know, I felt strongly about it. I didn't want to give up, and I definitely didn't want my children to think I was giving up. So that was a hard decision, and it's a personal decision for all of us. But fortunately, I stumbled upon this clinical trial at NIH, and when I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do. It has the initial chemo to wipe out your immune system, but then after that, it's your body fighting the cancer and doing what it's supposed to do. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I was just convinced, and we took it to my doctor, and he's like, you know, I'll support you however you want to go. And I said, good, because we're going. And we called out there, my husband and I, and made it happen. It was March of 2012, and it was called the GI-TIL trial then. I went for my initial interview, and they accepted me, so we went back 2 weeks later, and they did another lung wedge, and I think they took 4 tumors out of my left lung. I returned in April, and they give you, it's a month in the hospital. So the first week, they give you the cell-depleting chemo to wipe out your immune system, which is yucky side effects of chemo. And then the second week, they give you your cells that they have grown in the lab for a month. So at that time, I got 42.6 billion cells back with a drug called IL-2, which has some pretty nasty side effects too. 20 pounds of water weight gain overnight and some funny hallucinations and pretty crazy. But anyway, the recovery was probably the hardest, giving yourself a couple weeks to recover your immune system enough so you can go home. And I got home and things really started improving right away. My chronic cough that I had, my husband would hug me and pat my back, and I'd immediately go into a coughing spasm. That went away. I was able to walk my dog. I mean, everything, like day by day, was better. It was incredible. So I was the 9th person to do the trial. I was the first with cholangiocarcinoma. I was the first to have a partial response, overall shrinkage of about 30%. So from April of 2012 to October of 2013, for 18 months, I had no other treatment. It was my own immune system fighting my cancer. I had an amazing quality of life. It was during this time frame that the researcher who was studying my cells discovered a T cell, a mutation-reactive T cell. One of my T cells recognizes one of the mutations in my DNA that turns to cancer. And so I knew that things were starting to change, and we were busy, and I have 6 kids, and I kept not answering their phone calls over the summer. We went to the beach, we went to we were just busy with life. That was in Park City, I think. And so finally, in August, somebody from Dr. Rosenberg's office called, and he's like, "We've been trying to get a hold of you. You need to call us back." And I'm like, "Well, what's going on?" "Well, we want to retreat you." And I'm like, "Okay, great. All for it." So I went out there as soon as possible, had more testing done, and I was sitting in this bed, and Dr. Rosenberg came to the foot of my bed and explained what they had discovered with this T cell. And his excitement was so contagious that I was like, okay, immediately, let's do it. But it was so incredible that he was so excited about it. So I went through treatment again. But the second time around, they did 127.6 billion cells, with 95% of that being that mutation-reactive T cell, where the first time around there was only about 20% being that T cell. So they had really high hopes for good results this time around. So I had another lung wedge done. They removed more tumors out of my right lung. My husband's fancy photography work. 2 more chest tubes. Wheat thins is a great antiemetic, I'm telling you. Yeah. I can fall asleep anywhere, anytime. I think that's from being a paramedic for 20 years. It doesn't matter. I'm sleeping there and eating at the same time. Lori remembers these poles. You can't go anywhere without your poles, your IV pole, your everything. That's NIH. That's my husband. He was able to stay at a family lodge real close and walk to the hospital day and night. It was awesome. The second time, I knew I was going to be there for 30 days, so we decided to decorate the room and make it a little homey. My husband blew up pictures of the family. My small group from home wrote out Bible verses. We made it really homey. It made the treatment a lot more bearable. This is cell infusion day, and it's amazing they can put 127.6 billion cells in a little 250 ml bag. I'm like, I would think it would be big. That was cell infusion day. I was neutropenic for a while. My brother lives real close, so that was awesome. I got to spend time with him and his family. That's my cell bag. This is Dr. Eric Tran. He's the one who discovered this T cell, and he's on Dr. Rosenberg's team, and he's amazing, and he's kind, and he's caring, and he's passionate about his work. And it's people like him and all these other doctors and researchers that give me such hope and inspiration for us and for our future. Bald again. I've been bald so many times, but it grows back, so have hope. He was so generous to give us a tour of the lab and explain to us how this process works. I wished I could explain it to you guys, but it's over my head. I thought I understood it, but it's just amazing the work that they do. I was blessed to have that tour and to learn about it. So right now, there's been 12 people in the last 2 years who have gone through this trial. 3 with a response, including myself. And they are making such progress. It's not fast enough, but they're doing a lot of different things. So It's been 28 months since my last treatment. I have not had any other treatment, no chemo, no radiation, no nothing, just my own cells fighting the cancer. They've continued to shrink for the last 28 months. I recorded this last visit, and it's just now starting to look like it might be turning the corner and starting to grow again. But they've added some different things to it. They've added the pembrolizumab to the cells as another possibility of increasing the response rate. They're looking at getting a trial started where they take the receptor off that mutation-active T cell and genetically put it on other young, healthy T cells that they can infuse back into you so that they hopefully will live longer in your body to attack the cancer. These are some tumors in my lungs, and that was 6 months after treatment, how much they had shrunk. More tumors in my lungs. If you look at that middle picture, that tumor was huge. It was like about the size of your fist. That's my progress, I think, as of 10 months. More tumors. So it's just amazing that, you know, my body's doing what it's supposed to be doing. The study was published in the Science Journal with the data that they did on me, and it was in May of 2014. And after that went out, I heard from hundreds and hundreds of patients and families and caregivers, and that made me have the drive to want to pay it forward and help in whatever way I can. And working with the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation has given me that opportunity, and I feel so fortunate to be able to do that. So that's Dr. Rosenberg. He, father of immunotherapy, he's amazing, and he's the most humble man I have ever met in my entire life. They just published some more data on the trial just this last December, and that data is saying that 90% of the patients that they looked at had a mutation-reactive T cell. So those T cells are there. Now they're just working on how to get those T cells to be responsive enough to attack the cancer. So there is hope, you guys. It's coming. It's coming. This was my last visit. Isaac is my newest fellow. We get a new fellow every year, and I've never not liked one of my fellows. That's the beginning of the trial, middle of the trial, and this was just in January. And so still doing pretty darn good. You will hear no complaints from me. Dr. Tran, and this is my latest data, and you can just see it's starting to curve up a little bit. So they're getting a little concerned, and we're gonna keep a watch on it a little more often than usual, and if I have to go through treatment again, I'll do it in a heartbeat to get another 28 months of great quality of life. I do believe every day holds a possibility of a miracle, and I just want you guys to just keep up your hope, keep up your faith, and just keep going, because every day brings us new hope. Was there a video?
All right, so, you know, last time you came to us, we were a little bit concerned about, especially something in the right lung. It looked like it was just like a little bit plumper than the visit we had before, okay? And so that's why we brought you back a little bit earlier, and it's also why we got the PET scan to see if there's anything active, okay? And so when we look at this time, are you familiar, you've been with us for a while.
Yep.
Are you familiar with our RECIST criteria? Okay.
No.
All right, so the way we do tumor evaluations, hey Marie, the way we do tumor evaluations is by this set of criteria called RECIST. You can Google this and read about it if you want, but it's R-E-C-I-S-T, okay? And in RECIST, what you do is you measure your target lesions. So you pick your targets, all right? Sometimes people have like 30 lung tumors, all right? You don't want to follow all of them, it's too much work. So you pick your targets, you pick up to 10, all right? And those are the things you measure every time. And then what you do is you measure the longest diameter, all right? And you add up that and you get a number. And that's the number that we talk about every time we talk about percentages. It's how much does the sum of the longest diameters change, okay? And the last time you were here was the best change, or the nadir, the lowest number since your second treatment, okay? And I think it was like down by 56%, okay? All right? All right, so the way RECIST works is that there are only two types of responses. There's a partial response and a complete response. A partial response means that the sum of those longest diameters shrinks by 30%, okay? Now, that partial response only refers to target lesions, right? So this doesn't apply to you, but just so you understand how the system works theoretically, if you had a tumor that was a non-target and was growing, but you had all these others that were shrinking, that would still be a partial response, you see, because it only captures those. A complete response means that every tumor in the whole body goes away, okay? So you've had a partial response. Your target lesions have been shrinking, but so have all the other tumors too, so that's great, okay? So what we have noticed from the last scan to this scan is that there's a couple of the tumors, probably the biggest one that's on the left side and the one on the right side from last time that we were concerned about. Both are what we would say look a little bit plumper, okay? But by this measurement system, there will probably be no change in actual numbers, okay? So it's kind of a subtle change that won't be captured with measurements, okay? So it's something that we notice and we think about, but it's not something that we're gonna, you would objectively see a difference, okay? All right, and then so we also did the PET scan, and the PET scan kind of shows some mixed results, okay?
Okay.
I know, that's like not what you want to hear, right? I'm sorry. So I compared it to the PET scan we did in June, and so in June, there's a tumor that's kind of high up in the left lung. That tumor back in June took up sugar, so it's what we call FDG avid, okay? And on this scan, it doesn't take up any sugar at all, okay? So it's not FDG avid, okay? Now there's degrees of FDG avidity, okay? So you could take up a little bit of sugar or a lot of sugar or somewhere in between, okay? And they've got a unit that they use to describe that, so they can use a number every time and communicate to each other. And they call that number an SUV, okay? So that kind of gives you an idea of how active the thing is, okay? And I say thing because anything can take up sugar, all right? Your brain is the brightest thing on a PET scan. Your heart's bright, okay? Because they use a lot of sugar, okay? So the bigger tumor on the left side is more FDG avid now than it was in June, okay? As is this tumor on the right side, okay? There's also a tumor that is pretty close to the middle part of the lung that is also bright now that wasn't bright before, okay? So that's why I say mixed, in that there was this thing high on the left that now is not taking up sugar, but some of these other things are taking up more sugar than they were before, okay? And in the liver, there's no signs of tumor there, okay? There's those places that were tumor before, and what we see is that they just don't take up sugar now. It's like there's inert tissue there, or dead tissue there, okay? So that's what we see.
Okay.
Okay?
So, you can pop in whenever you have a question. So to me, that tells me that something's growing or coming back. So are we gonna wait and see?
So, yeah, your assessment and opinion are very similar to ours. Okay, to us, it's kind of a signal that things definitely aren't still shrinking, and maybe they're starting to turn the corner. Okay, and maybe because we can't predict the future, right? But we can definitely see that it's a little bit more than it was last time. Okay, so what we plan to do for now is bring it back in 3 months, so a little bit shorter time, and bring it back and get scans again, okay?
Okay.
But otherwise, we're not planning on, sending you home to get chemo. We're not planning on starting a new treatment for you here just yet, okay? Right now, it's just so slight. It's not, the numbers will probably not be any different than the last time that Dr. Yang did the measurements, okay? But there's like a gestalt.
So that's where I'm at. This was just a couple weeks ago, and I kind of feel like it's the story of our lives. It's one appointment at a time. We see how it goes, and then we go from there. But I also want you guys to know that there's hope, and there's things coming out, and we all just have to hang in there and keep supporting each other, and and keep doing what we're doing. And I'm so happy and excited to have all of you here. It's been such a pleasure to get to know everyone. Thank you.